Hello and welcome to episode 5 of Robins on the Wire, a Bristol Live podcast covering all things Bristol City. And it's a bit of a special one today because yesterday was transfer deadline day. Obviously, Bristol City were also in action this weekend when they took on Hull City. We'll spend plenty of time discussing that because what a game it was. But as usual, I'm Dan Carter and I'm joined today by Jack Buchanan. Jack, how are you, mate?
Yeah, all good. All the better for the win on Saturday. It was lovely.
Yeah, obviously we'll get on to that, but I guess just starting with how you feeling after heading into the international break, transfer window's done. Obviously delve into it properly, but what are your thoughts at the moment?
All right, to be fair, I think overall it was a good window. I think obviously everyone would have said if we could have got one more in the sort of attacking areas, that would have been nice. But equally, Mayulu's looked good last couple of times he's come on. Now that we've signed Neto Borges as well, obviously late on, hopefully you can see you moving up the pitch a little bit and not having to do as much of a defensive role. So it kind of adds to the creativity of the side. But yeah, overall, happy with the window, happy with the first 4 games. Couldn't have asked for much more, I don't think, going into the first break.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. Right, let's focus on Hull first, because I do think it's almost kind of got lost a bit, hasn't it? Just how good a game it was heading into the break because of the transfer window. Just before that game, I know we spoke about it on the pod last week. We did hear from Gerhard Struber and got a bit of an injury update on Josh Stokes. That's a broken metatarsal, is what he said. He reckons about 3 months he'll be out for. I guess personally, I just feel absolutely gutted for Josh because it feels like he might have had a real opportunity to kick on, having found his way into the squad in the last few weeks.
Yeah, it is. We mentioned it briefly, didn't we, on the pod last week, and it's just one of those where like he was just maybe starting to get a few games. Obviously, he played the 2 League Cup games, or the little bit of the Fulham game that he did anyway, and it's just come at a really unfortunate time. He had a great spell at Cambridge last year. Obviously, we know the sort of player he is from that loan and older shot as well. Yeah, 3 months. It's annoying. It's like we were saying. We were hoping it's one that doesn't keep him out through to January, Christmas sort of time, and it looks like it is, which is a bit of a pain for him because he's not even really going to have much of a chance to break into the team before the January window, when it might end up being that he gets loaned out or something like that, which is a massive shame for him, and a bit of a blow for City as well. If we pick up 1 or 2 injuries in that sort of attacking area, obviously we're 1 more player short now.
Yeah, I think it's obviously something we'll probably touch on a bit more when we get to the transfer business. But like you say, 3 months, you'd hope maybe if you can get him back for that sort of Christmas period, I guess that's almost the sort of big area when you look at it, because there are so many games in that spell. If he can get back fit, you can play a lot of football. I remember Scott Twine last year kind of came back from injury in late December, and then you're almost thinking like, oh, we've lost him for so long, and then within a week or 2 of him being back, he's already played 4 or 5 games. So I guess they'll be hoping he'll be back for then. But obviously, without him against Hull, City started exactly the same team that played against Derby. So it was Radu Vitek in goal, the back 3 of Rob Atkinson, Rob Dickey, Zach Viner. Mark Sykes was on at right wing back. Ross McCrorie left wing back. Jason Knight and Adam Randall continued together in midfield. Scott Twine and Anis Mehmeti just behind Emil Riis. When that team landed on Saturday afternoon, Jack, were you pretty happy? Pretty much what you expected, you reckon?
Yeah, I wasn't really looking for certainly wasn't expecting any changes. The only one I was maybe dubious about was whether or not Riis would end up starting. But the fact that we protected him against Fulham and he didn't come on kind of led us, like we said on Thursday, I think, to kind of believe that he would be back in from the start. And obviously, Struber confirmed that in your press conference as well, that him, Atkinson, were both ready to go. Max Bird getting a good sort of half hour or so as well, and looked sensational. I really liked the way that they played all 3 of Knight, Randall and Bird come the end of it, which I think we mentioned last week as well. Yeah, happy with that team, and obviously they went on to get the win after a bit of a shaky start, really.
Yeah, that start. I think we always try, don't we, to get a bit of a peek behind the curtain into like the role we both do, I guess, in these sort of podcasts. And I think quite often people wonder what we do during a game, but when you've got a game like Saturday and you're trying to do a live blog, it is absolute chaos. Like my fingers cannot move quick enough to keep up with what was happening. I think there was no greater example of that than those first 3 minutes, because it seems bizarre to say, but City started really well, didn't they?
Yeah.
And then one sort of like, I'm still not really sure what happened with the goal, to be honest. It just looked like Atkinson got his touch a bit wrong, a little bit of a slip, and then just got caught out. Was that right, would you say?
From my angle, it looked like he just sort of didn't really control it as he maybe hoped to. And then he's not the quickest, is he? So as good as he is, he does pretty much rely on not getting that first bit wrong so that he doesn't then have to try and catch anyone up and go out to one of the better strikers, better front men in this division, I'd say. And once you give him that sort of time and opportunities, as good as Vitek is and as big as he is, he's never going to really miss that one-on-one, is he? It's a hell of a finish as well.
Yeah, it ends up in that almost properly sort of no man's land, doesn't it? Where Vitek's got to come and try to close him down, but equally, you're never expecting him to get there. I thought what was interesting, you might have, because you sit in section 82, don't you? Right in it. It was interesting. Yeah, right. It was interesting when that goal went in that it didn't. The chanting from that corner of the ground basically didn't seem to really stop. You know, so you're so used to that sort of like dull noise coming across, that sort of silence, and the away end celebrating. But even as City went and got the ball out the back of the net, it wasn't loud, but it just seemed like the home support just kind of carried on doing exactly what they were doing.
Yeah, and I think that's something we maybe missed at times last season. The only one I really vividly remember that happening was when Tommy Conway scored. And I think that was for very different reasons. But yeah, I think it probably, I mean, you'd have to ask the players, but I'd assume it only helps when the atmosphere doesn't drop when they go behind, because obviously they all know that they're losing. They need the fans to try and help pick them back up a little bit, I suspect. And we did just that, didn't we? It wasn't that long, really, till we got the equaliser. And again, I think it was about half hour in, we were 2-1 up. So it was kind of the ideal turnaround, really. Yeah,
and it was just like, I think if you'd arrived late, you wouldn't have even known how Hull would manage to get ahead, would you? Because from that point on in that first half, it did feel like it was almost one-way traffic. I think Mark Sykes really stood out to me. Probably not necessarily the one many people would have picked out, but I thought the way he triggered that press down the right side, there were a couple of times where he really stepped in and managed to nip the ball. And I guess the leveller comes down that side, doesn't it? You know, it's really good work down the right, and then it's Zach Viner, isn't it, who overlaps, swings the ball across. I mean, I've seen him play those crosses before, but they might not be, I think, how you'd necessarily coach a fullback to cross the ball, but they do seem to cause like a fair bit of problems, don't they, when he just stings them into the back post.
Yeah, it was like watching 2015 Luke Ayling back down at Ashton Gate. It was brilliant. Not quite sure how he ended up in that position, but it was a hell of a ball in, and McCrorie's done well to get it back across. I'm not entirely convinced he wasn't trying to shoot, but it drops from Riis and he pokes it in. That's all that matters. It ends up in the net. So good goal in the end.
Yeah, obviously his first as well for City. I think we spoke to him after the game, and you know, he's an experienced striker, but I think that will have done his confidence a world of good to get off the mark. And it is a real striker's finish, isn't it? It's a proper right place, right time. He holds his run slightly, so he's in the position to tap in McCrorie's cutback. It's probably the exact sort of goal Bristol City would have signed him to score, you'd get the feeling.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that goes for both goals that he scored, actually, as well, to be fair, because that second one, obviously, we'll come back to the Mehmeti goal in a second, but both goals from Riis were real sort of striker's instinct almost, like dodgy touch from the defender for his second goal, and he just instantly was straight on it, pounced, nicked the ball away, and I think as soon as he went through, I think almost every City fan knew that it was going to end up in the back of the net, which is always handy.
Yeah, we spoke to him after the game. Hopefully we'll get the piece out later this week. Obviously, it's been a bit of a whirlwind, the transfer window, but I found it quite interesting because we asked him about that second goal, and he said he felt the keeper made his mind up for him by showing him loads of space at that side. And I've watched it back, and there is space, but I think that almost shows just what a good finisher City have found here, because although there is space, you know, to pick that up in that moment where I know he's got time because he's pinched the ball, but to recognise where you're best, because I think most strikers would probably go across the goal there, and to pull it near post. He is. I know I don't want to over-egg it after just 2 goals, but he is showing real striker's instinct that maybe other than Nahki Wells over the last few years we've not seen often enough.
Yeah, definitely. He seems to have picked up again. I think the sort of Sheffield United game was excellent from him for very different reasons. He was creating a lot of runs, a lot of space for others to score the goals, and obviously missed quite a good chance. But if there's ever a time to do that, it's 4-1 up on the first game of the season, isn't it, really? My word, he didn't miss any chances, did he, on Saturday? The two proper chances he got, obviously had that little dink that nicked the crossbar. He took, and yeah, we've got a very, very good striker on our hands. And it did make me chuckle a little bit. I don't know how true the rumours were that when it said Preston were interested in Sinclair Armstrong, it would be an interesting swap from them, I think, wouldn't it?
Yeah, they're certainly quite different players at the moment. We kind of skipped over it there, but you mentioned it. Anis Mehmeti's goal as well. I think we'll talk about him a bit more, I think, later on, but Ross McCrorie is the man for me there that you've got to talk about again, because the way in which he's attacking that back post and has probably done that so for, let's say, probably about the last 6 months now, he is proven to be an incredible outlet for City in an attacking sense that really cannot be undervalued.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely a really, really strong fullback. And you did the press conference with him in the week, and he was mentioning sort of how often he's managing to get those runs and how people aren't really picking him up just yet, and hopefully it stays that way. But even the second assist he got up for the header really well with their defender who had actually picked him up for once, and he still managed to get the ball across, and Mehmeti pokes it in, which is always handy, isn't it? But yeah, McCrorie, I think we all can now finally see the quality he brings after obviously having a very tough start to life in Bristol with that sort of freak injury almost for the first 6 months or so that he was here. And to be fair, I can't really remember a poor game that Ross McCrorie's had since then.
No, I think he's almost starting to fall into that Jason Knight category, with the I think Jason Knight's always such a hard one to give a player rating and stuff because you expect so much from him. So if he ever dips anywhere below that level, you almost notice it. And I feel like Ross McCrorie is almost at that level now, where the work that he does in and out of possession on either flank as well, I think that's such an important thing to emphasise, is that there's no way when he was signed under Nigel Pearson, City thought he'd be playing as a left wing back in a Gerhard Struber team, did they? It would never have been the case. And the way he's adapted to every challenge he's kind of had thrown at him, I think he deserves so much credit. And I enjoyed interviewing most of the players, I think, that we get to speak to, but he's someone that I'm always kind of struck by how just driven he is. He's quite laid back. He's got that sort of cheeky sort of footballer thing about him, but you can tell there's someone there with a real hunger to win and a real hunger to be successful. Yeah,
100%. And I think it was the headline of your article or the headline of City's video of the conference was literally, I just want to win. And that is pretty much all he wants to do. And you can see that every time he steps out on the pitch, which is all you can ask for as a City fan, at least, is players who you can guarantee will always give 110% until they're physically incapable of doing so. And yeah, he does that, and he does it very, very well, doesn't he?
Yeah, 100%. We'll get on to the sort of second half then, because McCrorie and Mehmeti obviously were both involved a bit later on, but before we get on to that, it feels like we've got to do our weekly segment of just how good is Radu Vitek, because we've seen some good saves from him, but that one to deny Ollie McBurney in the second half on Saturday, I think might be the best one yet.
Yeah, it was sensational. It's certainly the one that's got the most coverage, wasn't it? And there was one probably only about 15, 20 minutes later where I don't know who it was that went through for Hull, but he managed to palm it away then as well, and it was virtually a one-on-one. Two very different saves, two excellent saves. I think after watching the United highlights at the weekend, I can once again say that their best goalkeeper is probably playing in a City shirt at the moment.
Yeah, and I think we mentioned it the other week, but it's the fact that someone that tall can get down that low that quickly. I think we're used to him coming out and claiming crosses now, aren't we? Because to be quite honest, at 6'6" without ever many extra inches, thanks to your wingspan, you should be catching crosses, but to get down like he did, and you mentioned it after Sheffield United, didn't you? It's the fact he doesn't just save the ball; he really pushes it away from danger. And perhaps he didn't do that against Derby with the save he makes later on, but I think we can kind of say it now. We've seen him in 4 different games now, haven't we? And I think it's safe to say, he does feel like an upgrade. And we'll get onto the window as a whole later on, but he's been I wouldn't say a revelation. I feel like that's a bit over the top, but he has really changed the way that you feel about that defence, I think, in the space of his first few games.
Yeah, I think everybody feels a lot more, just a lot more confident as a fan base anyway. When you see those chances, like when the whole player went through 1-on-1, not the Gelhardt goal, obviously, but that was a very different sort of situation. And Vitek's there to make the save, and any cross more or less that comes into the box, you think he's probably going to get something on it because, like you said, he's probably about 7 foot tall once you throw his arms in. It's like, he should be getting up over anyone. And yeah, he's just absolutely sensational. I think it's probably one of the best pieces of business we've done in the last sort of 5 years or so. I know he's only on loan, and I think he's probably on a fast track to first team football at Man United. But yeah, what a player. What a player.
Yeah, and I think it makes... it's interesting that, obviously we hear from both head coaches after most games, and quite often, their focus is on the opposition manager, their focus is on their own team. But that's now, I think, 2 or 3 times we've come in from a press conference and the opposition manager has mentioned him by name directly. The whole boss was, he basically felt that was the hinge point of the game. If that header goes in and it's 3-2 just after half time, Lord knows what happens. In the end, it stays out. And I don't know how actually long after it was that City made it 4-1, but I think it almost slipped under the radar just how nice a team goal this is, as well as a great finish from Max Bird. Nice interchange between Ross McCrorie and Anis Mehmeti, sets Anis through, doesn't it? And it's just cut back, and he didn't even seem to think. Max Bird just almost dinked it into the top corner off the bar.
Yeah, the link-up play from McCrorie and Mehmeti, as you mentioned there, was literally right in front of me. I'm probably about 2 rows back in section 82, so I got a really, really nice view of that. And it was one of those times where we mentioned it a lot. It felt like Anis Mehmeti on Saturday was playing without thought. He was playing with instinct, and once again, like he did at Sheffield United, tore them apart at times. And yeah, that was a key example of it. A nice little 1-2, quick passing, didn't dilly-dally on the ball, just got it into Bird, who was in sort of the perfect position to tuck it home. And it was nice to see him get on the score sheet as well, because obviously it's been a long time coming getting him back in the team sort of consistently at the start of this season. It's one of those players that we do miss, even if it's not always noticed, maybe with how good Adam Randall's been.
Yeah, I think I remember speaking to Liam Manning and Max Bird about his sort of goal scoring record, and they always used to say that they felt he could be a bit too precise. He's one of these players that he won't just ever just have a dig. He'll try to put it in the top corner. I think you've seen that with some of the misses he's had, where they've literally been aiming for that postage stamp. And it's quite interesting that even what was quite an instinctive finish on Saturday, he put it in a place where very few goalkeepers are going to be able to reach it, and came close to a second, didn't he, when he rattled the bar with... I don't really know what the keeper was doing, the whole keeper, because it looked like he almost put his hands up and just let it go between them off the bar. He must have been very confident of where he was, but yeah, I think that's probably the best Max Bird's looked under Gerhard Struber, would you say?
Yeah, 100%. And we haven't seen all that much of him. Obviously, he started at Fulham, but that was a bit of a tricky game. We didn't really get much of a foothold in it for large portions of it. And I think playing him in that further forward role, which we've mentioned, I think, a couple of times now, I think that is where he plays best, because he's got that freedom to kind of effectively do what he likes. And we saw it with that dig there at the bar. I think we hit the bar 3 times in the end on Saturday. And you obviously came close as well with his little run down the outside and coming into the box and winning us the corner in the end. And it was one of those games that could have easily turned into 6 or 7 if we'd just maybe had a couple of shots that managed to find the back of the net instead of the crossbar. But yeah, Max Bird looked to be playing with freedom, looked to be playing well, and getting those 3 in the middle was ideal. I think that might be something to look out for going into the next sort of chunk of 3-4 games before the following international break in October.
Yeah, you mentioned Yu Hirakawa there. I think it was probably a bit of a surprise to see him coming on for Mark Sykes when he did, because I thought Mark Sykes had been pretty bright, but I almost don't really know where to start with his cameo, because every time I seem to look down, obviously we're in the press box in the Lansdowne stand, so we're pretty much above where he was playing. And every time I seem to look down, he seemed to be doing something, whether it was like flying into challenges inside the whole half or beating his man. He looked incredibly lively. It looked a bit like the Yu Hirakawa when he was incredibly raw that we saw right at the start of last season. When he's like that, I don't think there's many players more exciting to watch in a City shirt, is there?
No, not at all. And it was funny when he had that run. It wasn't that long after he came on when he had the shot that won the corner. I think it ended up being his only shot of the game, but he beat like 2-3 players and got the shot off. I think almost everybody expected the Hirakawa from last season, or the back end of last season, where he'd almost become a little bit more timid at times with the ball, and he'd pick it up and he'd just kind of shift it on. I think everyone was calling for, I can't remember who it was, making the run down the outside. It might have been Riis or someone like that. Just to play the simple pass and hook the ball into the box. But instead he takes on 3 players, wins us the corner, and everyone's like, oh, okay, maybe this is a system thing, maybe this is just he's having a cracking game. But yeah, I'm hoping we see more of that side of him. And like you said, he was flying into some tackles as well. It wasn't that long after that, or just before it, that he won the tackle in the whole half, like you say. And yeah, he was all over it, which is really good to see, because I think there's a hell of a footballer in there. I think everyone saw it on the classic sort of highlight reels before he came, when he was obviously playing over in Japan. And yeah, hopefully we just keep seeing more of that, and he can end up having a really good season for us.
Yeah, and it's that thing. I guess the outer work, sort of out off the ball work, out of possession work he did, kind of emphasises what worked so well about Saturday, was how I think Gerhard's words were always been those merciless moments in it where you go in and you properly kill them, and you get on top, you get in and you just break it up. And I think to a man, City were excellent at that. And I know you've wanted to speak about him. I know quite a few people have mentioned him from Saturday, because if he was probably at his best display so far against Derby, I think what he produced on Saturday was even better. But Adam Randall, I think I've not seen many midfielders do what Jason Knight does better than Jason Knight sometimes, and it felt almost like that, where in what were quite grim conditions, he just seemed to constantly nick the ball or play like quite simple passes, or like get his body in the way. He's really hard to describe, isn't he, as a footballer? But I guess all action is probably the word I'd use. He just doesn't seem to stop.
Yeah, like you say, he's hard to describe without making him sound really boring, because he basically just does all the simple stuff to like perfection. Like, he'll win the ball back, he'll play the 5-yard pass. He's like you say, he is basically Jason Knight, and on Saturday probably outperformed him, to be fair. Without trying to directly compare the two, I think Randall did have the better game on Saturday personally. And yeah, like you said, it's definitely his best game in a City shirt. I think we've already seen him settle in over the last 2 league games. Obviously came on at Fulham as well, but the game was sort of dead by that point. And yeah, he breaks the play up so well, and he's got a decent eye for pass. It'll be interesting if we can see him end up scoring a couple of goals. Obviously, he scored against Valladolid in pre-season and took that goal really well. So maybe if we can get him in those sort of positions, that would be nice as well. But that's sort of a bonus, isn't it, really, compared to what he's doing at the moment.
On that, I wanted to know if you picked it up in your vlog, but the volley he attempted from, I think it was a corner when it dropped him on the edge of the box. Yeah. I'm not being funny. I don't know what poor person got in the way of that in a whole shirt, but the noise it made as it hit, I don't know where it hit them. But there's times, isn't there, where like that sort of noise just echoes around the ground, and everyone kind of made the same like noise at the same time. But he struck that, like one of those where on the playground you scream Gerrard as you smash it. I feel like.
Yeah. He absolutely walloped it, didn't it? I don't know who it was, like you say, but it caught him square in the chest. And it was one of those where you're amazed they haven't just sort of collapsed to the floor. Yeah. Like, the ball went out for the throw, and he was just sort of hobbling around holding his chest. I was like, you poor guy. But if he didn't do that, it was going to fly in, wasn't it? I don't think anyone else was stopping it. So fair play to whichever defender it was. But yeah, he can definitely hit a ball.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to touch on Hull's last goal, because I don't know about you. I can't even really tell you exactly what happened. It ended up mattering so little. I think it was frustrating goal to concede. I think probably for Vitek as much as anything, he didn't look particularly happy with it, because it looked quite simple, and again maybe not quite dealing with the cross in the way they should have done in a similar way to Hull.
Yeah, a little bit. Like, I didn't really see the build up, to be honest. I kind of zoned out by that point of the game. It was pretty much done and dusted. I was filming a bit of the crowd. I think they were singing about Fali Maulu, so I was trying to get that in for the video. But anyway, yeah, the ball comes across, it squeezes through Vitek's legs. But what I did like is, even though we were 4-1 up, obviously I don't like the fact we've conceded, but Vitek's reaction to it Like, I think he was kicking the post and stuff, and he was very clearly frustrated with how it had gone in. A lot of goalkeepers, obviously, they'll be frustrated to concede, but at 4-1 up, they're going to be a bit like, oh, well, not the end of the world. Like, the clean sheet bonus was already gone, I suspect. So, but yeah, it was nice to see that sort of reaction from the players, the defenders as well. Luckily, it was too late for any sort of tangible comeback or anything like that from Hull. Otherwise, I think a lot of City fans, we've seen it all before, haven't we? Those sort of late comebacks against us. Nottingham Forest 2021 springs to mind. But yeah, thankfully not this time round.
Yeah, that probably takes us to the end, really, of the sort of game. I think we can reflect on the start of the season as a whole after we probably talk about the big horrible elephant in the room, which is the end of the transfer window. I guess probably the best place to start is during that game. I think that there were reports from Sky suggesting that Wrexham had bid for Zach Viner. I think, was it the first bid was it £1.5 million, they said, and then it was incrementally up throughout the next few days. Obviously, we now know he has gone nowhere. He's very much still a Bristol City player. Again, Sky's reports yesterday suggested that basically he wasn't for sale at any price, not even 5 million, I think was what they said. Gerhard Struber, we asked him about it on Saturday, and he was very much, I think the word he used was that it'd be damaging, which I think says a lot, to lose a player of that importance at that stage of the summer. Just thought it'd be interesting to get your sort of views on that one, Jack, because I think Zach Viner seems to be one of those players that City fans blow quite hot and cold on, of just how important he is or how good he is sometimes.
Yeah, I think I'm firmly in the camp that post May 2022, he's been one of our best players. The season's fresh out of lockdown. He wasn't great, but obviously he was still very young. It was probably his first real season playing consistently from memory. He might have played a bit more in the lockdown season. I don't try to block out my brain, to be honest. But yeah, I think he's one of our most important players, played every minute last season. Obviously, we got in the playoffs. So he was always going to attract interest this summer. I think him, Knight, and arguably Anis Mehmeti as well is very much a stylish footballer who will attract offers. I think keeping hold of all three of those and turning down the odd offer here and there for Viner, I don't think any official bids ended up coming in for Knight that I can recall anyway. It's a massive statement as a club, and you'd like to hope anyway, with him being out of contract in the summer, and the same goes with a few of the players. I think McCrorie and Sykes are out of contract as well come the end of this season. You'd like to think that a contract renewal is top of list of things to do from today on, really, once the window's shut.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I've seen a few people mention it today, and I think it's an important point to make, that given some of the frustrations that we'll come on to elsewhere in the window, is, at the moment, and again, this can change, but with his contract situation as it is at the moment, not accepting £2.5 million for Zach Viner is almost like spending £2.5 million on a player, because if he walks away for nothing in a year's time, you don't get any of that money back. I really liked it. I've written a piece this morning kind of with my thoughts on the transfer window as a whole. And, I wrote in the verdict we did after that playoff semi-final that for me, the most important thing this summer was keeping the core of the group that was so successful together last year together. And I think some people will see that as like you just standing still, but I think we've seen it so often with Bristol City, haven't we? Where, a team gets a bit of success and then 2 or 3 players move on. I think back to that team that did so well under Lee Johnson in the Carabao Cup, that summer after Bobby Reid left. And then I think Joe Bryan left the same summer, didn't he?
Aidan Flint as well.
Aidan Flint. There was the team where Adam Webster was sold on the eve of the new season, having formed a great partnership with Thomas Callis the year before. Even if you think back to last year, you've spent so much time and effort helping Tommy Conway get to where he is, and then you end up selling him. You're not the ones to benefit from that. So to me, I always felt that keeping this group together was important. And I think with Liam leaving and Gerhard Struber coming in, that becomes only more important, because you can't afford to be starting from square one again. The foundations are in place, and they are really solid foundations. Of course, you want to build up from that sort of baseline, but you don't want your baseline to drop. So I think the fact that we've come out of this window and Jason Knight's still a Bristol City player, Max Bird, even Ross McCrorie, there was speculation around Mark Sykes, Anis Mehmeti, Zach Vine. You can go on and on and on. Even Cam Pring and George Tanner getting tied onto new deals. I actually think some of that business might be as important as anything else City have done so far.
Yeah, 100%. We've left ourselves in as much as maybe there's one or two positions and one or two players that people would have liked in and out come the end of the window. I think we have left ourselves in a much stronger position than maybe a lot of people thought we'd be in. If you sort of rewind a couple of months to when the window opened, I think a lot of people would have probably accepted that one of those players we've just mentioned would have left. I think everyone almost assumed it was a foregone conclusion that someone would come in and buy Jason Knight after the season he had last year. I remember turning to my mate at Bramall Lane after the loss in the playoffs and saying that's probably the last time we see him. Like I think there was almost a resignation to that sort of fact, given City's sort of long history of having to be a selling club due to financial fair play and things like that, which is completely understandable as frustrating as it can be at times. So yeah, like you say, keeping Pring and Tanner to new deals and hopefully getting another couple of those sort of deals signed on before January will be just as crucial as anything else we do.
Yeah, so I don't think we need to spend too much time looking at the business that was done earlier in the windows. I think we've done that to death. Obviously there was the 3 permanent additions were Emil Riis, who we've spoken about plenty today, Joe Lumley, who be interesting to see just how much football he plays now that the Carabao Cup's out of the way, especially because you'd imagine Max O'Leary will be fit again by the time the FA Cup rolls around. And then Adam Randall again. 3, I think, Joe Lumley's kind of a bit different, but the other 2 really good additions. Then Radu Vitek on loan. And then Sunday night saw City do a little bit more business. Confirmed the signing of Neto Borges on loan. Left wing back who can play left-sided centre back, I believe. Brazilian, 28 years old. Spent the last year at Middlesbrough. I guess just what are your first impressions of that one, Jack? What do you reckon?
Well, I've got a mate who's a Middlesbrough fan. So messaged him after you tweeted saying we were looking at him. And it wasn't that long really before it was officially announced, which was nice. But yeah, messaged him, and it sounds like he's very much more of an attacking wing back than a defensive one. Which, from what we've seen so far under Struber, kind of suits us, I'd say, for the most part. Especially now we know that Viner hasn't gone anywhere as well. Obviously, it strengthens that defence and Atkinson back. And barring his little slip on Saturday, he looked superb once again after that first sort of 3 minutes or so. So yeah, all in all, decent signing. Seamus only a loan, but I suppose it was kind of expected. You're gonna have to help me out here because I can't quite remember. Is there an option to buy or not?
I don't think the club have confirmed one, but I think there were some suggestions from the Middlesbrough end that there might be one. It's one that I'll try to chase up and find out more about. Probably easier once we can speak to Gerhard again after the break. But I think it's an interesting one, isn't it? I think I can't say I know a huge amount about him or didn't before he came in, but the views from the Borough fans seem to be quite positive. And it's quite clear that it's an area City have been looking to recruit in all summer. Basically, it's kind of felt like one that's been mentioned, hasn't it? There's obviously speculation around Hayden Roberts' future. He's not ended up going. What's his name? Liat Pakarada was linked. I think basically as soon as we finished the podcast last week, his move to Heidenheim was confirmed, wasn't it? So yeah, I think it seems like somewhere Gerhard was probably quite keen to strengthen, and seems like a player that looks like a natural fit for that sort of system. Obviously, if it's a loan, you won't be able to play against Middlesbrough, which is frustrating. But I think it the sort of signing that's going to get loads of people off their seats. No, but it felt like another quite smart piece of business, which almost sums up how I think most people are probably feeling about the window as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think we've really signed, maybe Vitek, to be fair, anyone that's made the rest of the league sort of stand up and take notice or anything like that. But equally, we've not signed anyone who everyone's going to go, oh, that's weird. Like, that's not a very good signing, etc., etc. Everything's been pretty sensible, pretty smart, even down to Joe Lumley, who probably won't get a lot of football now, like you mentioned, that the Carabao Cup's out the way. You'd assume barring injury, God forbid, Radu Vitek keeps hold of that number one shirt, or number one spot, I should say, through at least till Max O'Leary's back. I'd rather have him in. I think based on what we've seen over Max O'Leary the last few years, I think Vitek does look better on the whole, but that's a discussion for nearer the time. Where everyone's sort of gone, yeah, it's just very, very sensible, very smart, sort of solid 8 out of 10 business, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and then obviously, like the comment from Gerhard after the game Saturday was very much that it's kind of the first time he gave us some positions that they were working on, and it was, I think the words he used was one more at the defensive end and then one more of an offensive sort of player. So I think that kind of, when you get the defensive one in it, what was it, about 9:30 at night on the Sunday before deadline day? Everyone's kind of waking up on the Monday morning, aren't they? Basically glued to their phones, waiting for some news.
Yeah,
on that more attacking edition, and there were links with Jacob Brown. That move didn't end up coming to fruition, and I guess unfortunately, really, there wasn't a lot more noise, was there yesterday? Really, there weren't any standout names that really caught the eye.
No, not really. You saw that there were a couple of names. I saw Colin Chaplin sort of briefly doing the rounds, but that never really looked like it was anything concrete. We know he's worked with Struber before, obviously at Barnsley as part of that team that sort of performed the Great Escape really at Oakwell. The back end of the season, I got chopped with COVID. But other than that, yeah, it was a relatively quiet one. Well, silent one in terms of incoming. Sorry, but we saw Adam Murphy, Jamie Knight-Lebel, and Sam Bell heading out on loan. Which I'm quite happy with. I think it makes sense for all of them. Sam Bell would be interesting. I know the club haven't mentioned that there's any sort of recall clause in January, so possibly the last we've seen of him in a City shirt, which is a bit of a shame, but I guess there's nothing to say that if he goes there and scores 30 goals in League One or something crazy like that, that he's not going to get a new contract, and we'll have to kind of wait and see, I suppose, but hopefully he does well there nonetheless.
Yeah, I think it feels like a good loan for him, doesn't it? It's hard to believe. I was looking back, obviously, when the news kind of broke yesterday that, we're heading in towards 5 years since he made his first team debut. It was Dean Holden that gave him his first championship appearance. And it is a shame because I tweeted it yesterday, but I remember interviewing Sam on the side of the Liberty Stadium pitch at must have been about 11:30 at night in February when it had been snowing. It was absolutely Baltic and horrible, but I've never seen someone like with more of a smile on their face because he'd scored the winner in that FA Cup game. And he had a really good FA Cup campaign that year, scored against West Brom at Ashton Gate, and kicked on from there. And it just feels like those injuries he's had over the last 2 seasons have really kind of halted his progress. And I think he mentioned it in his interview with Wickham. Last season was obviously a frustrating one for him. Didn't make a league start over the course of the whole season. I think his only one start came in the Carabao Cup and he got injured against Coventry. Most of his football at wing back. And it feels like a bit of a shame, doesn't it, that we've probably not quite seen him hit the heights in red and white that he should have done given his start.
Yeah, definitely. We mentioned it last week. I think we went into a bit more sort of detail on maybe why he hasn't really kicked on. Like you said, injuries have kept him out of the team, and then when he's been able to get in the team, he's been at wing back, he's been out wide. He's never really the football he played best was under Nigel Pearson in that FA Cup run that you mentioned just there, when he was playing more or less as a striker, wasn't he? Or certainly a very inside left forward. And we've just never really managed to see that a whole lot again. I know Pearson tried it a bit at the start of the season after. Before Manning came in, but I think he got injured again and things like that. It just didn't end up clicking, which, like you say, it is a big shame. But he's one of those that goes with everyone's sort of well wishes, and well, we might end up seeing him in a City shirt again. It does feel pretty unlikely, I think. But best of luck to him.
Yeah, I echo that completely. You mentioned the other two that headed out on loan yesterday as well. Adam Murphy and Jamie Knight-Lebel both dropping into League Two with Swindon Town. That sort of news kind of broke around midday, didn't it? It started to get out. I think both players are actually on international duty at the moment, hence the slightly limited announcements from Swindon's end. I guess if we start with Adam Murphy, it feels like kind of the natural next step for him, would you say? Because it's coming up to, it'll be 2 years when we get to January since he signed for Bristol City, and I think injuries really affected the first year and a half of his time here. Put together a really solid run of form for the under-21s last year. Started this season being again in around the first team, not in competitive action for him. It does just feel like if you can go out to Swindon, get some good minutes at the top end of League Two under a Bristol Rovers icon in Ian Holloway, it could be a natural next step for him in his career.
Yeah, definitely. It'd be nice to see him get some men's sort of first team football. Like you said, a few injuries here and there for a year or so. Naturally, it's got to be a struggle to get in the team then. And obviously, the Irish leagues run differently to the British leagues as well, which is a similar sort of situation to what we had when Yu Hirakawa came in, funnily enough, where he'd almost been playing, by the time last season ended, almost been playing for 2 years, like continuously, not far off. And obviously, barring the injuries, Adam Murphy was in a similar sort of spot. But yeah, hopefully some first team minutes in the legs, things like that. Same for Jamie Knight-Lebel, which I was a little bit more surprised to see him dropping down into League Two. I'd have gone perhaps expecting a League One loan with him, but I guess maybe if he can go in and be starting every week, you'd hope, then that's almost just as good, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it was probably quite a difficult one with Jamie to quite organise, I'd have to imagine, because this is partly what conversations I've had and also what I'm putting together. I think it's probably not quite been clear how required he'll be for so much of the season in a first team capacity, because obviously went away with the squad to the Algarve for pre-season. He then was in and around the first team heading into the season. Has only played for the under-21s and hasn't actually been in a competitive first team matchday squad yet. But I know I'm pretty sure Gerhard said to us he was training with the first team. I can't remember. I think ahead of Derby, and he hadn't played for the under-21s because of that. So he's kind of been in that sort of, I think Gerhard said it about Josh Stokes, that sort of limbo position where you don't quite know where you are. Imagine with speculation around Zach Viner's future as well, City would have been reluctant to sanction a loan move too early in case they left themselves short of bodies defensively. And I think sometimes when you get into that position on deadline day, it just depends who actually wants the young defender on loan. Maybe there weren't League One clubs where he was going to be able to go out and play regular minutes. I think Swindon probably, you'd imagine he'll play most weeks at a decent level. I think they're expected to be up and around it vaguely, aren't they, in League Two this year? So, and it's local as well, which means I'm sure everyone at the academy and first team, Gerhard, if he wants to, can keep a close eye on him. Dennis as well, the under-21s coach. So, yeah, I think maybe he probably could have got to a higher level. Maybe that would have had to be done earlier in the window, but I don't think it's a bad loan move for him at all.
No, absolutely not. And like you say, men's football is sort of all you can really hope he gets at that sort of age. The level is within reason somewhat irrelevant as long as it's sort of, you don't want him going on loan to like Manor Farm or something at his age. But yeah, a solid move. Like I said, hopefully him and Adam Murphy will get consistent starts or at least consistent minutes at the very least. So hopefully they come back more polished, I guess you could probably say, and more experienced for sure.
Yeah, they're both of those deals. City made public the January recall options in there, so that would suggest that if they do really well and City need them, they can bring him back. If things don't quite work out and they feel they need a loan elsewhere, they can always bring him back and send him somewhere else. That's what City did with Ephraim Yeboah last year. So, yeah, it's an interesting one to watch on. I guess feels a bit weird, doesn't it, to be talking about deadline day where, again, nothing major to report. But we touched on it earlier. I guess the striker point's the sort of standout talking point, isn't it? We've mentioned it on here before that the lack of depth, or maybe not, lack might be the wrong word, but the quality of depth behind Emil Riis, something Struve himself has mentioned. City are heading into the next 4 months at least now with Fally Moedu, Sinclair Armstrong, Harry Cornick and Ephraim Yeboah as their alternatives behind Emil Riis. From a fan's perspective, Jack, are you happy with that? Do you think that's enough for a team that wants to be challenging in the top six?
If Riis stays fit, then yeah. If Riis gets injured, then absolutely not. So I think we've just almost got to touch wood and hope and pray that he manages to stay fit. I don't think he's ever really had that many injury issues from what I've kind of looked at recently, anyway.
A few at Preston, I think, like a couple of big ones, I think, but I'll be honest, I worry about it in the same way I worried about Nahki-Wells at times last year.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be harsh on Sinclair and Fally, because I think it's a real opportunity now for them. We've got to remember there was a period last year where Sinclair got ahead of Nahki-Wells in the striking pecking order. Fally, I think, is a more interesting one, because obviously we've not seen a huge amount of him actually play for Bristol City. But you just worry if he went down in training in the international break, which again, touch wood, he doesn't. I think you'd just be slightly nervous, wouldn't you? Because although the two of them could come good, and I think every person associated with Bristol City hopes they do come good, what we've seen so far wouldn't suggest they're quite at the level to fire you to the playoffs.
No, I think the big concern for me is if Riis goes out, and I know Mehmeti's scoring and Bird obviously got one on the weekend, Twine's been scoring as well, and we know McCrorie can chip in with goals, but you've got your two immediate backup strikers, because let's assume that Harry Cornick and Ephraim Yeboah aren't the ones that immediately come into the starting lineup, have not scored for almost a year. Mayulu's not scored for over a year. Armstrong's not scored since, I think, the 30th of November, which, by the time you get to January, if he still hasn't scored, obviously is well over a year. So it's risky, and I'm sure Struber and probably the recruitment team as well would have liked to have got someone like Jacob Brown, who you mentioned there, in through the door. Obviously, it wasn't to be in the end, but it is what it is. We got to work with what we got and hope that nothing bad happens to Emil Riis, because if it does, well, it'll kind of remain to be seen what happens. But I think most fans can probably take a guess.
Yeah, I think it's been a topic of conversation. We're on episode 5 of these now, so we've been doing it for over a month. And I think basically the whole time we've said that, the feeling has been that if you want to get another forward in, someone's going to have to move out the door. And I know Sam Bell went, and I'm sure there'll be people going, well, if Sam Bell went, does that free up space? You don't know. I don't know the ins and outs of that deal. You don't know what Wickham are paying. You don't know how highly he featured in Struber's plans. You don't know what sort of wage he was on and how much that's actually freed up. Do you know what I mean? There's so many variables. And I think it was always going to be, I think it could have been done. And I think had the right deal presented itself, they might have done one without letting anyone go potentially. But it would have had to be the right deal. I've written it this morning. Steve Lansdowne said ahead of that second leg of the playoff game, his exact words, we're not going to go wild, I think. And I think we've said it time and time again, but signing what would have basically been a 7th or 8th striking option without getting rid of one of the two strikers that, let's remember, City paid quite good money for last summer. I think it was always going to be unlikely. And, I guess it's kind of a bit of a challenge now, I guess, for Gerhard, isn't it? Go out there. Can you get more out of these guys than what we thought we would? Because I don't think anyone's expecting that to be easy, but there must be there's talent there, especially with Fally. I think that's the one we've spoken about so much. There's a player in there, and I guess it's down to him if he can try and get something out of him.
Yeah, 100%. And what I thought was a real shame on just always circling back round to the whole game and Mayulu coming off the bench. He had that chance, well, half chance, where he sort of broke away on the halfway line. It looked like he was almost in the clear if he just kept going. He's not exactly slow. It was one of those where I think he tried to almost do too much. I think it got stuck under his feet a little bit. If he just kept using his pace, he might have been able to get a shot off. If it goes in, it does him the world of good, doesn't it? And everyone gets behind him. The nice thing to know, though, is he came on and City fans are still chanting his name, not quite as loud as they were chanting Harry Cornick's name, but we've seen even less of him this season, or over the past 2 seasons, sorry. So yeah, it'll be very interesting to see how it goes. I just hope that Mayulu and Armstrong, to be fair, you just almost get the feeling with Mayulu though that if he gets one, he might be up and running again, barring any sort of rumoured off-field issues after the 2 he scored last season. Obviously, we don't know how true those are and things like that, but hopefully, if he can get 1 or 2 in the next sort of almost before the next international break, you'd like to hope that now we know everyone's in the house until January. This next sort of 2 weeks or so of training before the next match will look very good, and hopefully sort of bring that all together and bring it to fruition even more than it already has done.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point and an important one to make as well, is that, we don't know. The whole manager spoke about it on Saturday, is just how much he felt the speculation surrounding some of the members of his squad had an impact on their performance. And I know there's not been tons of talk around Fallon and Sinclair and other players in the squad, but everyone's kind of got that clarity now, don't they? They know where they stand. And with 2 weeks on the training pitch, I know I think they're having some time off this week before kind of preparing for Sheffield Wednesday, isn't it, after the break? I think, everyone knows where they stand now for 4 months at least, don't they? And hopefully that might relax a few people. It might bring the best out of a few people. There might be people not particularly happy with their situation. You don't know. But I, for one, am happy the window's open, so at least that topic of conversation's out the way. It's very much, regardless of how happy or unhappy anyone is with the business, the team at Struber's disposal now is the one he's going to have to work with till January, potentially beyond. And I don't think what is a slightly disappointing end to the transfer window should overshadow what has felt like quite a positive one overall.
Yeah, no, I'd absolutely agree. And as we're kind of sort of rounding off that transfer window, yesterday was, like you said, relatively quiet. How did it look for you in your sort of role? I suspect it was somehow got to have been slightly busier than the January transfer window.
Yeah, I think it's been a slightly odd summer, as people have been quick to point out. I've seemed to be away on holiday for like a lot of what's gone on. I think I missed, obviously, Gerhard coming in. I missed missed Adam Randall, and then was pretty much back the day Emil Riis came in. So missed a lot of the big stories of the summer. Then happened to really helpfully be away for a second time when Radu Vitek got papped at Argyle. So I'm really not helping my reputation here. But I think the thing is, you hear so much, don't you? You hear so many names, and you've only got to look at social media yesterday. There's so many names doing the rounds that you could just report them on the off chance. You throw enough stuff at the wall, something will stick. I think obviously that's not quite the saying, but I've tried to make sure everything we've got is accurate and the right stuff that's out there. We obviously got Borges on the weekend. Pacarada, by the sounds of it, that one was there was genuine interest there. It just didn't quite happen in time, which is, it's understandable. I can't imagine it's easy for City to compete with. Although quite a small German club, they are playing in the Bundesliga. You'd imagine that's an attractive option for any player. Yesterday was odd. It was a lot of asking about people to be told no, which, to be quite honest, I'm kind of used to from January, where that was basically the answer to everything. There was the little rumblings about George Earthy supposedly considering his future, and I was told very much that that was not going to happen. There was, like I said, Chaplin. I asked around that, but there didn't seem to be much legs in that. It was quite weird yesterday. There wasn't actually loads to chase up. There wasn't much talk out there. But yeah, I think it was a long deadline day, but for quite different reasons to other people. I know Dan, who covers Rovers, had 4 transfers, 4 arrivals to do in about the space of 3 hours at the end of the day. So it's all good fun in it. I think, like most football journalists up and down the country, I am absolutely delighted it is done and dusted for another 4 months, and already dreading January rolling round.
Yeah, but you get to watch like 4 months of Gerhard Struber being unbeaten before then, so it's all good.
Cannot wait. What else? What more could we want? Yeah, at least it's been entertaining, hasn't it? It kind of brings us on to, that sort of just assessing where we are. We've got about 5 minutes or so, I reckon, here. Just assessing that first block of 4 league games, unbeaten. I think they're 6th, aren't they, in the table? Yep. I know that doesn't matter an awful lot. Should have more points, I think, but that's not a bad start, is it, at all?
No, I'd like to have 10 on the board. I'd have liked to hold on at Derby. We never really looked like beating Charlton. It was very much a frustrating encounter, wasn't it? but I'd have liked to have held on against Derby. But 8 points from 4 games, if you keep that up for the rest of the season, you probably end up getting promoted. 2 points per game. At the moment, unbeaten. It's ideal, isn't it? Yeah, like you said, would have liked an extra 2 points, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I expected us to be on 8, to be honest. No one expected that 4-1 win at Bramall Lane. As good as it was, I think we all enjoyed it. Obviously, we've scored 4 twice already this season. Did we do it at all last season? Oh, yeah, we scored 4 against Plymouth, didn't we?
Yeah.
At home. But yeah, it's certainly been an exciting start, a very varied start. Obviously, you've had the 2-0 win over MK Dons, the 2-0 loss to Fulham, but 6 competitive games down under Gerard Struber. I think I still have full faith that he's the right man for the job at the moment. I see pretty much no reason as to why he wouldn't be. And I'd like to hope that a lot of City fans will sort of feel the same.
Yeah, I think there seems to be that sort of feeling of positivity, don't there, really, around at the moment. Obviously, nothing's won after 4 games, but even I think it was quite interesting that I don't like comparing the 2 managers too often, but throughout pretty much all of last season, Liam Manning didn't particularly like talking about the table. It was very much focused on games. But we asked Gerard about how he assessed that start on Saturday, and he mentioned the table without even being prompted. He was like, and the table looks good. So
yeah,
there's a different approach there, isn't there? There is that feeling of looking at the bigger picture. I think people say it's been potentially quite a nice start in terms of fixtures, and I understand where they're coming from, but I think so early in the season it's impossible to know, whether you've got a nice run or not of fixtures, or whether you've just played well. And for my money, I think to be unbeaten, the Carabao Cup, I think you can put that to one side. I think the foundations, I've used that word a lot today, but the foundations seem to be in place for what could be another successful season. And with the fixtures coming after the break, you'd like to think there's no reason they can't carry that on, starting with next weekend's trip to Sheffield Wednesday.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a strong start. And like you say, there's been a lot of talk. I mean, to be fair, when the fixtures came out, I think after Sheffield United, which obviously went a lot better than anyone could have hoped, everyone looked at it and went, right, those next sort of 7 or so are fairly winnable. We've got, who is it? Sheffield Wednesday, Oxford, Preston, and QPR before the next international break, which again is a fairly favourable run. But you can only beat who's in front of you at the end of the day.
Yeah.
It's not like Leeds went up last season playing Burnley every week. They had to play Luton as well. So we'll wait and see how it all pans out. But it's looking good so far.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's probably quite a nice place to wrap up for today. It's all a bit odd, I think, after expecting so much on deadline day and then quite quiet. Almost feels like Christmas almost happened on Christmas Eve, doesn't it? With Neto Borges, it's you got your Xbox on Christmas Eve and then woke up to socks on Christmas Day. But I think overall a positive window for Bristol City. Obviously now a nice little international break to kind of gather our thoughts, and then I'm sure we'll be back next week to preview Sheffield Wednesday. Maybe have something in between times depending on what we can manage. But if not, Jack, thanks again for today, and thank you everyone for listening. Please subscribe.
Cheers, guys.